Epilogue. I had forgotten how much I missed watching the sun rise over Lake Michigan. Chicago didn't seem to miss me as much for some reason. Still, it was good to be back sipping my Starbucks coffee and watching the gentle waves pile onto the sand at Columbia Beach Park. My old apartment was nearby, and I knew this neighborhood like the back of my hand. My phone buzzed in my pocket, indicating that my trip down Nostalgia Lane was over. Sure enough, the text message read, "On his way to you." That's my cue. I downed the last of my mocha frappa something or other and thought of the stuff I used to drink from Mama Joe. I missed it. But this life never allowed for roots of any kind. We were ghosts, constantly on the move, hard to see, impossible to catch. The Mark strolled down Columbia Ave toward the water with a quick and nervous step. He was worried. I would be too if I was stupid enough to step into his shoes. The Juvenile Experimental Test Center that was previously located at the far north suburbs of Chicago was abruptly closed and relocated following the violent and unexpected annihilation of the upstate New York location. The past 2 weeks had been a series of dead ends as Tiffany and I tried to pick up the trail of where the Jet Center had relocated. Finally, with the help of Jack Richter, and probably Mike, we located the head scientist in charge of the facility. He had spent the past 2 weeks on a last-minute vacation in the Bahamas. Strange that when he walked off the plane, his skin looked even more pale than his profile picture, and the rings under his eyes betrayed the vacation narrative that was advertised. Maybe it was exceptionally cloudy in the Bahamas for the past 2 weeks. Sure. The good doctor was clearly nervous about the recent occurrences. He looked behind him several times, convinced that he was being watched, which, of course, he was. 2 days ago, we tailed him to the same location, and we had to ditch him because he made us. When he got to the edge of the park, we lost him, and he didn't resurface for 2 days. Now that he was walking the same path, we were ready. Tiffany was hanging out at the Starbucks, wearing my favorite disguise yet, red dyed hair, hoodie, ripped jeans, and her headphones, of course. She had the gift of being able to blend in by being obvious. Everyone noticed her. No one ever suspected her. I was borrowing the corner condo at the end of the road. Deadbolts and fancy locks are no match for the power of creation. The family was on vacation for the next 2 weeks and was kind enough to let me do some surveillance from their living room. At least they would have if they were here for me to ask. I chuckled to myself, imagining what I would do if they walked in the door right now. Not like it matters. I'm not here to disturb or steal anything. Although I did use the bathroom in a small emergency this morning. I may have hit the White Castle a little too hard last night. Philadelphia is completely barren of that magical square heavenly burger. It's amazing how fast a sack of sliders can disappear. Right now, I was intent on following the nervous little bald man walking on the sidewalk below me. Every 10 feet he glanced quickly behind him, convinced that he was being followed. He walked a bit like a pregnant penguin, clutching his arms close to his chest and his toes pointed awkwardly outward. "I'm not behind you, buddy," I said to myself, and swept my binoculars across the deserted beach. Besides an occasional runner, it was completely desolate. A fuzzy line broke the water further out, and I swept back to adjust focus. Sure enough, the beach was clear, but a dinghy with an outboard motor was rapidly approaching the shore. I scanned the horizon and found what I was looking for. A yacht was anchored around the breakwater point to the north, barely in view. A very familiar yacht indeed. The rubber dinghy had 4 men on board, 3 dressed in dark clothing, the 4th in a business suit. For a second, he seemed familiar. I swung the binoculars back to the Penguin Doctor and saw him in a frantic shuffle across the sand. He had seen the approaching boat as well, and apparently decided that there was no one following him this time. He stopped beside a bench as the man in the suit stepped out of the beach dinghy and slowly approached. I took the opportunity to take a new position on the first floor in case I needed to pursue the target. The goal was to either track him to a new location or find out the next contact to follow. The foyer of the condo complex was covered in tinted windows and gave excellent concealment from the onlookers. I pulled the binoculars up and scanned the beach and found the park bench where the suit was taking a seat beside the nervous doctor. The doctor was talking quickly and sweating excessively, while the suit let him ramble without turning to look at him for several seconds. Then he turned and reached out, putting his hand on the back of the man's neck. He smiled a sickening, familiar smile. It can't be. With a shaking hand, the doctor handed over a flash drive, which the suit pocketed in his expensive coat, and looked back at the water and rising sun. Then he nodded once, making the nervous doctor jump to his feet and scramble awkwardly to the dinghy where the 3 thugs, or should I say hunters, were standing by. 2 of the hunters climbed back in the boat with the good doctor and pushed off. The remaining thugs stood gaunchly on the shore and watched the boat head to the open water, away from the anchored yacht. I suspected that was the last anyone would ever see of the good doctor. I shifted my gaze back to the suit, calmly relaxed on his park bench, appearing to be an important businessman on his way to another day at the office. The window of opportunity was barely open and closing fast. It was now or never. I stepped out and sent a quick text to Tiffany. Fast evac in 5. I walked up to the park bench as nonchalantly as I could across loose sand, the goon on the shore tracking my every movement. The closer I got to the bench, the faster he moved in my direction. Ah, the bodyguard. He was still a ways off, hand in his jacket, when I reached the bench and heavily plopped down beside the suit. The seated man jumped slightly and snapped an angry look at the unexpected intruder. "Aw, come on, Anon. Is that any way to greet an old friend?" His look went from alarm to disgust. After a glance at the fast-approaching hunter, he regained his composure and smiled, showing off his perfectly white teeth. I had both hands spread out on the back of the bench, my left hand dangerously close to one of the most powerful demons in existence. How did I get here again? He laughed and jerked his head to the oncoming thug. "Have you met my friend? He would like to have some words with you. It seems that you are responsible for starting several of his close comrades." Anon was almost laughing at this improbable set of circumstances, but there was something new in his voice. His arrogance was covering a tiny crack of anxiety. There was fear in his laughter. The muscle-bound hunter was just 20 feet away and pulled a silenced Glock out of his coat. Before he could level it at my head, I waved my hand and a 5-foot deep hole appeared beneath him and instantly refilled, trapping him to his neck. Anon stopped laughing. "The pleasure is all mine, really," I said with a smile. "Perhaps I will have the opportunity to reacquaint you with your comrades in the near future." Turning to Anon, I said, "You really do look good. Whatever moisturizer you're using is definitely working. You must share your secret sometime. Perhaps we can do lunch." Anon glared back, his toothy smile replaced with a clenched jaw grimace. The sound of a motorboat announced that the dinghy had returned. To no one's surprise, the doctor was not among them. Lake Michigan claims another. "No," I replied, getting to my feet. "Well, perhaps a rain check then." I started walking back to the road when a motorcycle pulled up to the edge of the beach. A smoking hot redhead was smiling at me. I turned back to Anon and added, "And thank you for your help. Much appreciated." His face held a mixture of astonishment and confusion. He glanced back to the hunter, frantically trying to extricate himself from the sand, and replied back to me, "And how is that, may I ask?" "Oh, for this, of course." In one motion, I focused on the fabric of his suit and split the pocket. Through the blue light of the power, I pulled the flash drive into my open hand and hopped on the back of the revving Harley. Tiffany laughed loudly as she gunned the hog down the residential street and out of view. She leaned back and yelled over the loud exhaust, "Was that who I think it was?" "You bet. Oh, and before I forget, we are supposed to do lunch with him later." Tiffany just shook her head and laughed. My heart melted a little as she gunned the throttle and I squeezed her waist to avoid falling off. I think she may need to keep the red hair for a while. The end.